Room. Labour is considering plans to process asylum seekers' claims overseas, according to a report in The Times. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock have reportedly been speaking to asylum experts to draw up an alternative way to stop migrants crossing the Channel in small boats. The plan would see asylum seekers have their claims processed in a second country, with successful applicants allowed to enter the UK. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has previously dismissed the government's Rwanda scheme as a gimmick. Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis are among major retailers who have opted to remain closed this Boxing Day. Traditionally, the day after Christmas is one of the busiest shopping days for high streets, with this year expected to be the biggest in 5 years. Wickes, Pets at Home and Home Bargains, as well as major supermarkets Aldi, Iceland and the majority of Waitrose stores will not open today. More than 3/4 of people are expected to do the majority of their shopping online instead. Labour has been warned to stay away from traditional Boxing Day fox hunt parades ahead of the next general election. Countryside campaigners have told the party to end its running attack on rural communities. They say Sir Keir Starmer risks igniting a toxic culture war if his party repeats past attacks on rural life. Fox hunting was banned in England and Wales in 2004. However, Labour has vowed to crack down on all hunts. Countryside Alliance Chief Executive Tim Bonner says if Sir Keir chooses to tighten legislation further, there will be a fight.
And this really isn't about foxes, and this debate never really has been. It's about people, and it's about the fact that there are elements of the animal rights movement and elements of the political left, the Labour Party, who cannot cope with the fact that hunts still exist, that they are still meeting today, that tens of thousands of people will be going out to support them. So I think it was bizarre, frankly, that we're really thinking again about going back to legislate further on this issue. But have no doubt, if they do, there'll be a fight.
And Queen Camilla has hosted afternoon tea at Windsor Castle with a girl with a brain tumour. The little girl, who has spent most of her life on chemotherapy, sang a Christmas song and gave the Queen a handmade ring when she was invited. Olivia Taylor has a brain tumour which has left her blind, but she leapt up to say "Hello, Your Majesty" as she met Queen Camilla. The 7-year-old also tried her very first cup of tea, which was poured by the Queen. This is GB News on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying "Play GB News."
Welcome to A Year in Politics with me, Christopher Hope, political editor at GB News. Well, the last few months of this year have been bumpy, but the whole year has been a heck of a ride. I'm here to remind you what happened by going through the front pages and just looking at the drama that we played out for you at GB News. But it's pretty cold here in Downing Street. Should we go to the pub? Welcome to the Red Lion pub, where people come to shelter from the political storm outside and grab a pint of beer and plot. I'm joined by two terrific journalists, the finest of their generation in Westminster. Kevin Maguire, of course, from the Daily Mirror, and Quentin Letts from the Daily Mail. We're going to have a review of the last 6 months of this year. Sit tight, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
So that's our decision. And having honoured the independent pay review process, I urge all union leaders to accept these pay offers and call off their strikes.
And so July started, with Rishi Sunak finally caving in on public sector salaries. The unknown Susan Hall became the Tory candidate for next year's London mayoral elections.
And I pledge that I will stop the ULEZ expansion on day one of my mayoralty.
It was to become one of the biggest issues of the party at one of the by-elections that same month, which ended with a bang when 3 by-elections were held on the same day. Labour and the Lib Dems won 1 each of the previously safe Tory seats. But the Tories used anger about ULEZ to hang on to Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
This by-election has been a referendum on ULEZ. It's absolutely been clear what the people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip want. They don't want ULEZ expanded, and Sadiq Khan needs to listen to the result of this by-election. I wasn't expected to win it, Labour were. And
forced the Labour Party to rethink its national strategy on ULEZ-type schemes. The month ended with a shocking scandal of Nigel Farage being debanked.
This is not about politics. It's not about opinions. I've been treated disgustingly. So many other people have been treated disgustingly. The difference is I have a voice that I can use on this, and I now intend to be a voice for everybody else.
And that led to the resignation of the NatWest chief executive for publicly disclosing personal information about Farage's accounts. August started with the government trying to tackle the UK's migrant crisis. We saw the first asylum seekers boarding the Bibby Stockholm barge, only to leave the vessel a week later due to an outbreak of Legionella. The controversial ULEZ extension in Greater London finally came into force at the end of that month.
Listen, I'm always sorry for anybody who's suffering adverse consequences because of our policies, but at the same time, I've got to be honest with people.
And a mini reshuffle saw Ben Wallace leave and Grant Shapps become the new Defence Secretary, while close ally of Sunak, Claire Coutinho, became Energy Secretary. But things started crumbling for the government in September as weak rat concrete closed schools, and ministers were asked why they had taken so long to do anything about it.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
The news interview had finished, or apparently after it had finished. And I'd like to apologise for my choice language. That was unnecessary.
Labour conducted its own reshuffle. Deputy leader Angela Rayner was given the levelling up brief, while Pat McFadden, a veteran of Tony Blair's government, became National Campaign Coordinator to gear up the party for the next general election. Sir Keir Starmer went to France to strengthen his personal relationship with President Emmanuel Macron.
We had a very constructive and positive meeting, which, as you can imagine, covered a wide range of issues. It was my first opportunity to say how much I value the relationship between our two countries, particularly when it comes to prosperity and security.
While the government decided to water down its net zero pledges.
The test should be, do we have the fairest credible path to reach net zero by 2050 in a way that brings people with us? Now, since I've become Prime Minister, I've examined our plans, and I don't think they meet that test.
September finished with a Lib Dem party conference, where members defied the leadership and voted to keep housing targets in England.
And what people object to about housing development is that the Conservative approach, the developer-led approach, has meant that you haven't built communities.
Kevin Quentin, let's get straight into ULEZ. Is that why the Tory party won that by-election in Uxbridge?
I guess so.
Quentin.
It certainly looked like it, and I think anything associated with Sadiq Khan is probably difficult for Labour, because he may work in the centre of London, but I think in the outer suburbs,
in the boondocks,
he doesn't fly quite so well there. And I think there was at that time, certainly, and I think it's still true now, a certain fed-upness of the population with the green taxes, and people being told that they can't use their cars and can't use their boilers, and got to get rid of their boilers in a few years' time. So I think that's possibly going to be something that we hear more of during a general election.
Can I ask you, Kevin, isn't it massively brave to do that 8 months out from an election when you want seeking re-election to do a policy which is so annoying for so many people? Why not win a mandate to expand? He did say to expand ULEZ in the last mayoral election, but not as much.
People always say they want politicians who'll do something. He's doing something, isn't it? And that's tackling dirty air.
It's brave, though, isn't it?
There's no doubt that it was the factor in the Uxbridge by-election why the Tories held on to the seat, despite Labour getting its best result in 70 or 80 years there. But the reason it worked is it hadn't come in. It was coming in a week later. So there was a fear of it. Now, it's not an issue in central London. It won't become a big issue in outer London because it's in now and most people realise they're not paying it. So I think the Conservatives took the wrong message from it. And Sunak thinking, right, I'll change the date for all electric cars, delay it to 2035 instead of 2030. Got nothing in the polls, no bounce whatsoever. Because I think he's taken the wrong message. It was
a small bounce of polls on that speech in September.
It's gone.
What's the lesson from this? I mean, is it to be the anti-ULEZ party? That when you win an election, will it?
No, of course it won't. No, the election is one on much bigger things than that,
quite.
And a mixture of things. But I think there is a general public irritation at a lot of the net zero stuff, and maybe Sunak should have gone a bit further on that. The population sees the encumbrances and the charges that it's suffering, and then it looks across the way to India or to China and sees them burning coal and just creating lots of pollution, and it just makes no sense.
Kevin, Sadiq Khan believes he's right to push for this expansion, and this is what he told us for GB News shortly before as it came in August.
You think one day people will thank you for this? That even your critics today will say, actually, Sadiq Khan did a good job there.
Well, there's been lots of people today who've been thanking me.
But even critics, the ones who are concerned, will they thank you one day?
Well, I remember as an MP, and I know you were in the lobby, in 2006-07, when the Labour government banned smoking in enclosed public spaces. You'll remember the noise being made then, and now people wouldn't think about reintroducing smoking in pubs. You study history, in the 1950s, a brave Tory government passed the Clean Air Act, which meant power stations were removed from the centre of our cities. Battersea Power Station, what is now the in the middle of the 19th century, the Great Stink. Open sewers led to thousands of deaths by cholera. People weren't grateful then to the sewers. When it comes to tackling public ill health, I think you've got to take bold action.
Do you think history will remember him kindly, Sadiq Khan, Kevin Gray?
I think he'll be relieved that history remembers him at all. I think most politicians do, don't they? I think so. Look, there's ULEZ-type charges in quite a few areas around Britain now. It's not just London. And most people accept them because they can see why a charge has come in. That's what you have to do. You've got to convince people there is a benefit from it. If you just inconvenience them or add costs without any result, then of course they're going to kick back. So now, look, it's a very important change. I don't like charges normally because they're very blunt, and by their very nature, they'll hit those with the least money. But do you want to keep breathing dirty air? The answer is no.
I think people just look at officialdom and think there's no point protesting against it. These so-and-sos are set out to make our lives more difficult, and we're fed up of being bossed about, but there's what can we do about it? I think there's a general level of complete...
And the Tories aren't really helping, are they?
No.
And that's part of the problem.
But Sunak made a little effort.
With that speech on net zero.
And pushing it back 5 years. I mean, it's going to come back, though. The closer it gets to people having to get rid of their boilers or not being able to buy a petrol car, people are going to get really big.
Yeah, but Sunak is still, through the legislation, 80% of new cars sold in 2030 will be electric.
Don't go anywhere. We're back after the break with a story of why Nigel Farage got debanked. More soon.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Red Barn Pub, here with my guests, Quentin Letts from the Daily Mail and Kevin Maguire from the Mirror. Great to have you back. Now, Nigel Farage re-emerged, didn't he, in politics, but not in a way you might expect.
I'm not sure he'd ever gone anywhere particularly.
No, but
yes,
a debanking scandal isn't really where you expect him to emerge.
I always wanted it to be debagging, and of course we did get that later. We did get that later when he went into the jungle and we saw him debagged in his shower. However, this was a terrific scandal. It really was monstrous. The behaviour that Farage suffered from having his account closed, basically.
And others too, by the way.
And others, not just him. He became hero of the people, allegedly. It was the behaviour of the NatWest super executives that was really stinky. And eventually, there was an element of justice there, but it did take a long time for Farage to achieve his aim.
You find it funny, Kevin?
Well, I always like it. A self-styled man of the people, Nigel Farage. Coots, the Queen's Bank, the snootiest you can get. But nevertheless, everybody should have the right to have a bank account. You need a bank account in our economy, in our democracy, and you should not have it taken away for political views, which I may deplore, I may not agree with, but nevertheless they are legal.
What I found amazing was it kind of blew up because the BBC thought they'd caught him out into exaggerating his position. And then, of course, some information about his bank accounts went to the BBC, and that led to this resignation of the boss of one of the big banks in the country.
Seems to have been some indiscreet chatter at a dinner, which is a perfect place
over drinks.
Over drinks.
None of that on Christmas Day.
And there was an element here of the elite just regarding Farage as really sort of slightly below the salt.
Yes.
And my goodness, they got their comeuppance.
But they've been underestimating him for years.
Yeah, they have.
Remember, though, an inquiry found out politics had nothing to do with him using his account. Sorry, I didn't buy
Well,
that.
he did what's called a subject access request, and some of the remarks about him were pretty below the salt, to use your
Well, they might have been accurate. But nevertheless, that is not a reason to take away a bank account.
Yeah, you can have anyone being banked, can't you? Anyone should be banked. I mean,
my late brother ran a bank which supplied accounts to people who otherwise would not get accounts, and there are an awful lot of people in that state. So, Nigel was onto something.
I would like to be a little bit more concerned for the million or so people who are considered too poor to be
correct.
Yeah, no, there's exactly
rather than people like Farage who could go to another bank.
Yes, eventually, although he found it quite difficult by his own account. But very, very quickly, what happened in the rack concrete? Remember the rack concrete?
Well, this was Gillian Keegan, who then said something indiscreet in front of a live microphone. Good for her. I think that made her a bit of a character, and I think people were quite sort of attracted to her.
Comprehensively educated. The one from Speak worked in a factory.
Yes,
like Keir Starmer worked in a machine.
A working class Thatcherite from Merseyside in her youth, and who's done rather well in life. Look, I quite like their approach.
Yeah.
I think she's daft if she's expecting any credit, because
She's
politicians
tipped as a
rarely get that.
possible leader by some people.
But nevertheless, she was like Nicola Murray in the thick of it. Just speaking, wasn't she? It was funny.
Why is no one thanking me? Well, the ITV journalist's not going to thank you for being a minister. You know, there's a chance to knock some chunks out.
We were back in a way to Michael Brunson and John Major with the remark that John Major made about the cabinet members who weren't supporting him. So, I mean, this is not the first time that a politician's been caught out with a live mic.
Are we being unfair? They want credit, don't they?
Who's being unfair?
Journalists. We are we're laughing about it.
You know her problem.
She had to apologise afterwards.
Right, she can say, look, I've inherited this problem from previous Conservative education
and
secretaries.
Labour governments. It goes back 30 years.
I think, you're going back a long way now to blame Labour. They're giving
but it was a 30-year
anyway, so I could see why she's a bit miffed. She said, look, I'm the one who's tackling it. But when thousands, tens of thousands of kids are not able to go to school, you're not really going to get a bouquet.
Just a quick question about media ethics, Quentin. Should ITV have released that video? Because it was an explosion after the interview had wrapped on ITV, and suddenly she said, "Is no one going to say well done to me?" You know, that kind of should have gone out. It did go out, and to me, and the fact it went out showed a government losing a bit of discipline and its ability to tell off the media.
Media ethics, yes.
Yeah, this is why I'm asking Daily Mail. Come to Mirror shortly on the media ethics.
I'm not sure. I think it was a fair cop.
Fair cop.
Kevin? Chris, you're going to get vertigo on your ethical molehill here, aren't you?
This is GBNews.
Look,
we have high morals.
She said it in front of a rolling camera.
It's a hot mic.
Come on, it's not a PR initiative to find out what she thinks.
It's a hot mic, and as you say, Michael Brunson and the bar famously.
Well,
with John Major,
Gordon Brown during an election campaign in 2010.
Yes,
a woman up in Rochdale.
And it's almost that those hot mic moments. They kind of affect governments at the end of their time, don't you think?
Yeah.
You might forgive them at the beginning. At the end, there's a problem.
It's where your luck is running out.
And finally, we've got to the final 3 months of this year. Let's see what happened. The Conservative Party conference started in Manchester with Nigel Farage stealing the show amid speculation that he might join the Tory party.
You may have noticed that Nigel Farage is wandering around your conference, first time in decades. Would you have him back as a member of the Tory party?
Now, the Tory party is a very broad church, right? I welcome lots of people who want to subscribe to our ideals, to our values. Right?
But all hell broke loose when the northern leg of the HS2 project was cancelled.
I am ending this long-running saga. I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project.
Then it was on to Labour, where it felt the adults were back in the room. Well, some of them.
True democracy.
But that did not deter Starmer from his mission to make Labour electable.
And that will the tax burden come down?
Will the tax burden come down under Labour?
I'd like the overall burden, particularly on working people, to come down, but obviously we will operate, of course, and always within our fiscal rules.
Which is reinforced by another double by-election defeat for the Tory party, which appeared to put Labour on course to win the next general election.
Very, very important investing of confidence and trust in a changed Labour Party.
October was dominated by the Israeli-Hamas conflict that broke out earlier that month, creating division in the country and in the Labour Party. To break with the old Corbynite Labour, Starmer gave a speech to unite his party.
While I understand calls for a ceasefire at this stage, I do not believe that it is the correct position now.
But not everybody was convinced, and the following month it resulted in 8 frontbenchers losing their jobs for backing an amendment by the SNP calling for a ceasefire. November witnessed the first state opening of Parliament by a king in over 70 years. Nadine Dorries, a Boris Johnson ally, decided to stir the plot.
So what is the point of having Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister?
And Rishi Sunak conducted his much-anticipated reshuffle, shocking Westminster with the return of former PM David Cameron. Even GB News viewers got a surprise. Suella Braverman was sacked for defying Rishi Sunak days before the Supreme Court gave its verdict on his Rwanda plan.
The Home Secretary's appeal is therefore dismissed.
We have a plan to deliver the Rwanda deal, and we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats.
We'll get back to migration in a minute. Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement had a surprise cut in taxes. This was the Chancellor in September.
Well, I'm saying that
no tax cuts are possible in a substantial way at the moment. So it's not just inheritance tax, it's income taxes, all the different taxes that people look at. If we start having big tax cuts, it would be inflationary.
But by November, he had changed his tune.
But instead, I'm going to go further and cut the main rate of employee national insurance by 2 percentage points from 12% to 10%.
So what had changed? The delight over tax cuts lasted a few hours before the net migration figures showed a huge increase in 2022.
We took back control of our borders, but we've thrown them open, and I think the people who put us into power in 2019 are absolutely entitled to be furious about this.
It was back to weeks of talking about immigration with a new 5-point plan designed to curb legal arrivals. And Rwanda was back on the table, with new Home Secretary James Cleverly signing a new treaty and laying new emergency legislation to stop the boats. But not all were convinced, and Suella Braverman used a rare personal statement to warn the PM that the party's future was now at risk.
The Conservative Party faces electoral oblivion in a matter of months if we introduce yet another bill destined to fail.
Then, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick resigned. The year ended with the Rwanda plan up in the air, and a real risk to the future of Rishi Sunak's government. It will be a testing few months in the new year for the Tory party.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Red Lion Pub with Quentin Letts from the Daily Mail and Kevin Maguire from the Mirror. We're reviewing the entire year of 2023 and we've got to the final 3 months. Now, Kevin, the party conference season, how do you find it?
Oh, God. Right, Sunak presented himself as the change when he's in office, but I thought where he blew his speech was not making clear right at the beginning of that week he was going to scrap the HS2. I think it was the wrong decision, but if you're going to scrap it, get it out the way. Instead, it just rumbled on all week.
Why was it allowed to be an issue? But because I think it's the OBR had to decide on a big spending commitment weeks out from the autumn statement, and it happened to fall during a party conference. They had to decide what to do.
I think he's just a poor politician, and he doesn't get it. So he allowed it to overshadow.
In Manchester, of all places.
Because he was overshadowed by.
Are we overblowing this, Quentin?
I think you're getting. I mean, it's a sort of issue that only the.
Bien passant,
only the
media
poshes,
elite,
only the poshes,
the Daily Mirror, and all the well-paid.
Only the sort of people who are going to ride on this train were upset about it, and it struck me as an entirely sensible thing to do. The thing should never have been commissioned in the first place.
David Cameron's fault.
David Cameron's fault. No, Lord Adonis's fault. Andrew Adonis and Gordon Brown.
But not axed by Cameron.
But they did it as a stink bomb at the end of the Labour years, and then Cameron decided to keep going with it. And this thing was a monstrous money pit, and. Really, does it matter if you're going to be 20 minutes earlier to a destination or not?
It's also about capacity and freight and how many trains you can operate. But the Tory mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, wanted it to go ahead. Boris Johnson,
David Cameron didn't resign.
If you're going to scrap it, I agree. I can see the case. Don't start it. But once you've started it, you might as well finish it.
Well, they're going to finish it to as far as Birmingham. I think the whole thing's completely pointless.
Well,
it was going to be billions more. More.
And the government got no credit for it. So he spent 35 billion on smaller routes, I think linking Hull to Liverpool. Important routes, but not as nationally.
Yeah, it was one of those things on which Boris Johnson was very blind as well, because Boris just liked building things. He liked train sets.
Yeah, bridges.
And he should never have got involved in it either. No. And he would have had many fewer financial problems if he'd pulled out of it earlier. Every week they did this. It was costing a.
He was a big critic, of course, of HS2, wasn't he?
No, Boris was pro HS2.
Well, he talked about the cost. I think I remember a column when he was against it. I think he went both ways.
Well, I think
it was Boris Johnson.
Well, looking two ways at the same time wasn't unusual for Boris Johnson.
Quite right. And we heard that. We saw that interview that I was able to do for GB News, having arrived here in the summer, with Rishi Sunak saying it's a broad church, the Tory party, when I asked him, could Farage join? But he was saying that we accept Farage. You know, why if the Farage can join the party of Churchill, the party of Thatcher, the party of Major?
I mean, he had to say that, didn't he? Because if he'd come out and said, there's no way that man's ever going to join my party.
David Cameron said no way.
Well, and then Cameron paid a price for that, didn't he, with his fruitcakes?
Nutters and cosset raceless.
He never said that.
That was a bad thing to have said for Cameron. No, you've got to be open, haven't you? But whether or not Mr. Sunak would welcome Mr. Farage seems to me is quite a different matter.
Would Labour welcome him joining the Tory party? I bet they would.
Oh yeah, because he'd cause mayhem. And,
he's so symbolic, isn't he?
No, absolutely. And there'd be so many Tory MPs who'd want to get out. That's it. But of course, when you've seen Farage fated at the Tory conference, and you ask Sunak, who can go in an empty room and nobody notices, or wants to, go in and join him. I mean, because he hasn't got the charisma.
I was at that meeting, and actually,
which one? The one with the growth coalition meeting.
The one at which Nigel turned up.
Liz Truss.
And he wasn't actually. It was a surprise when he came in. So I'm not sure that he himself was the draw.
No.
For the big.
It was Liz Truss mainly.
I think it was more for Jacob Rees-Mogg actually. And
remember him.
Well, that's speaking for a certain part of the party.
Yes.
And it was a question of what they represented. But could Nigel Farage join the Tory party? It seems to me a very difficult thing to arrange unless they have complete electoral wipeout.
Yes, so it's not under Sunak. And Labour's conference was after a rare moment, I can't remember in my time.
The striking thing about the Labour conference was a vast turnout.
Yes.
It was a vast turnout.
Lobbyists or members? Both.
Or both,
Yeah.
but a heck of a lot of lobbyists. And I saw a former
Yes.
top man from the CBI there who would not normally have been at a Labour conference.
Yes.
And there was just a sense of and from the lobbyists,
the money's
side,
flowing into the party.
A question of let's try and get in with this.
For me, it was the cardigans have gone, the suits are back. The cardigans of the Corbyn years are gone. It's the suits.
Corporate Britain can send change, and the
Money flows where it goes.
It's following the politics. And you're right. It was huge. It was more like a trade fair or the CBI.
It was.
The Labour conference than any.
But they passed some big tests, though, didn't they, for Labour? The fighting in Gaza was a test. Would have been difficult had Corbyn been leader to hold that.
It was only just happening. It was only 2 or 3 days old. It would have been more of a problem if it had been.
But
2
those
weeks
silences
later.
in the hall, which are called by David Lammy, I think Angie called one as well.
I think you're reading too much into that, Christopher.
No?
It was too new at the time.
Yeah, but I think
called now would be a problem.
Starmer controls his party with a rod of iron. You can think that's good or bad in a democracy, but it is the case. And then he even had the good fortune of having the protester sprinkling glitter stardust on him. Where
He didn't move, did he? He
handled it
stood
well.
there. He stood there.
No,
as
well,
it
he
fell.
Sort of kangaroo boxing.
He plays football, so he put his arm out as you would when you're trying to shield the ball and hold off somebody attacking you. He was lucky the guy was not
And
violent.
It could have been anything. So I was with Farage when he's milkshaked in York, which everyone laughed at on Twitter.
But Newcastle.
Newcastle, I was with him. Yeah, Newcastle. Sorry, on that bus, and he was shaking because he was. For him, it could have been anything. We know it was milkshake, and for this guy, it could have been anthrax or anything.
It was when Blair had purple powder thrown at him in the
Fathers
Commons.
of Justice.
And Tony Blair was very calm, I remember, but the rest of us in the House of Commons were rather less calm, and we thought it could have been something nastier.
But they did show that he was a party ready to govern. You both say?
I mean, I think you can overplay these things. I thought there were very few policies there.
Yeah, but to clinch the deal, you need to paint in vivid primary colours how you would actually benefit people's lives, how you'd handle big issues. But I can see why they haven't, because if your rivals are like having a pub fight, then why do you want to intervene? Just let them get on. They're destroying themselves.
I mean, the GBNews was at the conference, and we didn't interview a lot of shadow cabinet ministers, but one time Peter Mandelson appeared through the gloaming and approached the stand from behind, and we interviewed him leaning over the back, and he was half in, half out. And it was a fascinating moment. There's a man behind you who should come on the show, Peter Mandelson.
Look at this. Look at this here, Andrew.
Hello, my lord.
How are you going to come on? Look at this, Peter.
He won't come on.
We're talking about you.
The future Labour government.
New Labour's five pledges. A wonderful Labour government and what it's going to offer the country. Peter and I go back many, many years. How are you, my lord?
5 pledges or 5 missions?
5 missions.
You didn't know the 5 missions. You had to write them down. Restart the economy.
There you are.
Unlock cheap green energy. Get the NHS back on its
safer streets.
Reform. Unlock educational opportunities. Safer streets.
You're on 6
He knows them.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Why were you on the front row of a speech yesterday with the shadow cabinet? You're not in politics anymore.
Well,
Andrew.
Put there.
Andrew, there's a microphone.
I was put there in order to show my support for Johnny Reynolds and Rachel Reeves' speeches, which I did with great enthusiasm because they were great speeches. And I was put there in Sadiq Khan. We were like two bookends. I've never really previously seen myself as a bookend to Sadiq Khan, but you know, how the mighty have fallen. I mean, we've thus been reduced to being a stage prop.
When we last interviewed you for my podcast, you said you miss government every single day.
I do.
Do you think this party misses it every single day?
I think the bulk of it miss government every single day. There's still that sort of small minority who prefer to be protesting in the streets.
Yeah, he was leaning against the press office wall through a lot of that week.
He's so desperate to be involved, isn't he?
Well, I think he is involved.
Do you think he's involved?
I think he is involved. I think Gordon Brown is very involved as well.
Is he toxic? Man, he was always toxic in elders for long periods.
I think
is that been forgotten?
People forget. Look, he's a very smart, calculating guy. He's got the experience of winning elections. He wants to be seen to be part of it, and he is part of it. Because of course, success has many parents, and it's not going to harm, is it, his commercial prospects with his clients if he can.
That is really cynical.
It's not, is it? It's not going to harm him when he's his company, when he can say to clients, look,
He
I'm in
wants
with
a job.
the
He's told
Prime
me
Minister.
there's not a day goes by when he doesn't miss being in government. He's told me that.
The question is, how does he get on with Sue Gray? How does
Yes.
she get on with him? What does she think of his involvement? Does she think that he's a menace?
But he is. He's a smart politician. You can agree, disagree with him, but he's very clever.
Well, we're nearly at the end of our review of the political year, but the year was crowned by the re-emergence of David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, as Foreign Secretary, walking up this street on camera for the first time during that cabinet reshuffle in November. Find out what happened after the break.
Hello, thank you for being a big part of GB News.
We'd like to wish you and your loved ones a Christmas season full of comfort and joy.
As well as a peaceful and prosperous new year.
From our family
to yours.
We are proud to be your channel.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Merry Christmas.
Welcome back to the Year in Politics at GB News with me, Christopher Hope. I'm joined still in the Red Lion pub with pints going down slowly with Quentin Letts from the Daily Mail.
It's Christmas Day.
Of course it is. And Kevin Maguire from the Daily Mirror. Thank you for being here both and sitting in a pub while, well, we don't know what's happening outside because our phones have gone dead because we're in the basement. But let's start, I think, with David Cameron.
What a return.
Back in government.
What a return.
Brilliant.
And the moment that...
Did you see it coming? Quickly.
No, not at all.
No.
Well, can I say I once wrote an article in 2017 after he'd gone.
6 years ago.
Yes, I offered it because, like a stop clock, I'm right once a day. Or twice a day, forgive me. I'm not even right once a day.
It's been like the return of an old-fashioned, leather-upholstered, walnut-veneered Rover. One of those old things that Jim Callahan used to drive around in. Magnificent purring engine. And just wisps of exhaust coming out of exhaust pipe. He's a very old-fashioned figure now. It really feels of an earlier time. And the problem for him is that, you know, a lot of the personnel have changed, but also the nature of politics has become, because Parliament is now, again, sovereign, thank goodness, is that politics is much more feral than it used to be. And Parliament is really punchy now, in a way that it wasn't during the Cameron years.
However, that's fascinating.
However, his presence in the House of Lords, the old boobies of the House of Lords, are delighted to have him there because they feel a certain relevance has reapplied itself to them. And he's very good with the old peers because he sort of drips honey over them and they feel important. He's supremely sketchable, it has to be said, for those of us who are in the sketch writing business. And to see him in ermine, when he'd been introduced into the House of Lords, was just like seeing him a walking Steve Bell cartoon, because Bell and some of the other cartoonists used to cartoon him as this member of the aristocracy, and now he is one.
Yeah, Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton.
He's got the old Etonian flannel, which they like there.
Yeah.
Now they've got a foreign secretary, so that makes them feel important. But look, let's remember, we've got a foreign secretary, a man who lost Europe.
Yeah.
They call it a referendum. He didn't have to, but he lost it. So I don't think that says much about his grasp of foreign affairs. He had a huge financial lobbying scandal. So he wants to come back and be remembered in a different way.
Well, he was cut down his prime, Kevin, by a vote he wasn't meant to lose.
Well, he cut himself down in his prime, with Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson and all those who voted for
and watching
Brexit.
him in the cabinet with Michael Gove, you know, the enemy who knifed him over
what
the
does it
2016.
say? What does it say about Sunak and the state of the UK
Well, it
Conservative
says-
government? That they got to get a rave from the grave, a blast from the past. To show after at the party conference speech, Sunak has said it's all about change now. It's the 30 years of old consensus.
Right. Including Cameron.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, he's U-turned.
And that photo, Quentin, which emerged in November of him walking along, and who was the Prime Minister? Was it Cameron or was it Sunak? It looked like the junior figure was Sunak.
Rishi Sunak has a problem in his stature, physical stature. is way below that of David Cameron. And there was a handshake where they weren't actually shaking hands, they were some way apart, because I think that Sunak wanted to be kept as far apart as possible, because the closer you are, the more noticeable it is, the height difference. It's very bad luck, very bad. And it has to be said, there have been very short leaders in the past.
I think that they've got to think about how he performs with Cameron now, because I'm often in number 10 Downing Street when they leave cabinet. Cameron always leaves with Mitchell. He walks out with Mitchell because he knows that because his weakness, he's not in the House of Commons. He's walking with Mitchell.
Yeah, Andrew Mitchell is he's deputy, effectively. He answers for him in the House as it comes.
Yes.
He's a smarter politician.
Yes, he is.
Cameron, and he knows how to capture the limelight and the camera.
He's so funny. He's also funny. We always have throwaway remarks. I saw him on his first cabinet, and we had lunch in the Carlton Club, the home of the Tory party in Mayfair's Way. He walked in and said, "Oh, Chopper, how are you?" And I said, "Did you enjoy emerging and all the shouts from the cameraman and stuff?" And he said, "Yeah, it's really funny because someone shouted at me, 'Do you miss being shouted at in the street, Mr. Cameron?'" which he found totally hilarious because, of course, he didn't miss anything at all about it.
But it's going to tee him up nicely for the second part of his life. He's still a young man. He still thinks that he wants to do things internationally. And to have been Foreign Secretary for, will it be just a few months or will it be a bit more than that? You don't know. Well, it is a good career move for him personally, for all the rumness.
Is he laundering, because he's blamed for Brexit, is he laundering that reputation and making it better?
He's laundering his reputation.
He wants to whitewash what happened and come out gleaming white, but it's said by his associates he's got a guarantee to be Foreign Secretary for a year, so there'll be no May general election.
Lots more happened there, apart from that reshuffle. Suella Braverman. Now, she was sacked over an op-ed which was sent to the Times without the permission of number 10, and her views were on taking a stronger action with the police. I mean, it's failing to review what she resigned over now, doesn't it?
Well, she made a cruel remark about homeless people who said that it was a career choice. A lot of people agreed with that.
On Twitter, though, not, with tweets.
But, hang on, a lot of people agreed with that, but a lot of people didn't. And so it's a question of whether or not are you divisive? Are you seen to be cruel? Well, what I was saying about David Cameron, politics has changed. Politics is a lot more feisty now than it was. However, my personal feeling about this is that you need to be optimistic to be attractive electorally. And you've got to have a certain buoyancy about you. You've got to depict some idea that's going to cheer people up.
Yeah. Sunny up.
Suella is a more gloomy figure. And that was her problem. I don't think it was the actual content of what she said. It's the fact that she wasn't able to do so in an optimistic way.
Of course, she is one of the 3 Home Secretaries who's been to Rwanda, unlike any migrant, asylum seeker or refugee.
Yes.
But her crimes weren't just the homeless into lifestyle choice. And as somebody in an earlier life worked in a hostel for homeless men, it's not a lifestyle choice. It's pretty grim why people end up homeless on the streets. But then she said everybody marching for Palestine was a hate march, and not the case. And she incited a whole load of nutters who then came, the far-right violent activists, who then were attacking the police near the cenotaph.
Why is she saying? Is it all about leadership? Is it all about after the election she'll stand?
Sunak did a dodgy deal with her by making her Home Secretary after she'd been sacked by Liz Truss for a security breach, so he didn't have to face an election. And I think she just felt empowered and she could do and say whatever she liked.
She's certainly ambitious. Whether or not those ambitions have any basis in reality is going to be something for the voters.
Is she being proved right gradually? I mean, we haven't yet seen the whole immigration row being played out, but Robert Jenrick resigned, didn't he, earlier this month?
Well, I think it's too early to say, and the question of where does politics go next will depend largely on whether or not, or will be influenced to a great degree on whether or not the Conservative government can get a flight to Rwanda. If they do, then that will be a big moment for them.
No, she was not proved right. She's been proved wrong. Rwanda, no flight on her watch. Net migration, far, far higher than during European Union membership and free movement on her watch. Yeah. She was always blaming other people, always pointing the finger at somebody else. So her rhetoric, I thought, was pretty vile when she would talk about hurricanes and invasions. And she paid a price. Look.
That's what I mean about it. She wasn't able to do the jollity that you need. You've got not jollity is perhaps
but
too
that
light a
job
word.
as Home. I mean, Theresa May was not jolly in the 6 years she was Home Secretary.
No, and look at what a glum bucket she was as PM.
But she became Prime Minister, despite being miserable.
She did, but it was not a success, was it?
No.
You've got to create, and this is where Starmer doesn't do it either. You've got to create an oomph of positivity.
Yes. Where is it? Who's got it? Ed Davey. We haven't mentioned him once on this entire hour.
And that probably tells you quite a lot.
No. Looking forward
some by-elections.
Looking forward into next year. Is it going to be the immigration general election? That is what some are saying. Richard Tice, he leads Reform. He presents on GB News. He thinks that he's found the big dividing line is immigration.
That may be part of it, but if they could get that solved, if they could get a flight off in February, before Easter, say, then that might then become less of an issue. It will be the economy. It's almost always the economy, but also a sense of optimism about the future and where does it go next. And that's where the Labour Party's lack of policies needs to be addressed. I'm sure that they will start providing some policies. And if I were Sir Keir Starmer, I would use little Wes Streeting a lot more. I don't know why they're not using Streeting.
I think the issue is the economy, cost of living, number one. Number two, the NHS, state of that, public services. Number three, migration. And then you'll have other issues like the environment. They tickle some people. And then you're right about optimism. It's about confidence and optimism and Britain moving forward, not going backwards.
But Labour's got no answer on migration, has it really? I mean, it's doing the same as the Tory party. The Tories are adding a bit of
the problem for the Labour Party on immigration.
There is no easy answer. That is the truth. There is no. So you've got to avoid false promises.
Yvette Cooper, vote shredder, absolute vote shredder for Labour. Disaster. If I were Keir Starmer, I'd stick her on a catapult. I'd send her to Rwanda.
Actually, shredded James Cleverly, who we know
she hasn't.
We know
No.
we know doesn't agree with the Rwanda plan. He calls it bat.
She's terrible.
Who?
She's terrible.
And the election is when?
The election, I suspect, October.
Yes, but certainly that's what the PM is suggesting long term.
I think October, November. I think we might see the party conferences next autumn.
Because they make money off of the conferences, don't they? So never forget that.
And we're back to the order, whether it's Liberal Democrats, Labour, the Conservatives. So Sunak will get the last word. You can see him raise expectations, come back to London,
October,
jump in the car,
November.
day or two later, off to the palace.
Would he go as long as January? I mean, that would give him. I always imagine because on the stairs going down Downing Street, all the photographs with the dates 2022, 2025 is a long period, not 24.
I think voters would really thank him for having political
ruining
campaign
Christmas
over Christmas. Yeah. It'd be the ultimate Grinch, isn't it?
He'd lose the sketch writers.
Well, on a festive note, from a very festively crowned Red Lion pub, thank you for joining us for a review of the year with my friends and brilliant colleagues from the lobby in the House of Parliament, Kevin McGrath from the Mirror, and of course Quentin Letts from the Daily Mail. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching and listening to GB News. It's been a pleasure to provide you with political coverage all year. We're looking now to 2024, an election year. What a year it's going to be. A new government may be behind me in Downing Street. Will Keir Starmer find his way through the front door of number 10? We'll wait and see. But stay tuned. Do watch us next year. We're the election channel in 2024. Happy Christmas.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London Westminster